So this is our first week of our joint sabbatical. Katrina is doing her part of her deal, and we're doing our part of our deal going forward. And we're walking the same path, but separately, if that makes any sense. It's as if we're going down a wooded path. You're walking alongside Katrina and you come to a fork and you say, you know what, I'm going to go this way and you're going to go that way. And we're probably going to meet about 3 months down this path, and we're going to each share everything we've seen along that path. You'll see some things I don't see. I'll see some stuff you don't see, and we'll come together and share those things. So what I want to share with you this morning is really the best thing I have is just truth. I kind of have a habit of just being bluntly myself and letting the chips kind of fall where they may. Some folks like that. Some folks don't have any idea what I'm doing, and honestly, a good portion of the time, neither do I. But what I do have is faith that God knows what God is doing, and through some mechanism that I don't grasp, and I'm sure you're curious about right now, I wound up here. My normal process of going through a week and writing a sermon is that I never write sermons. Sounds crazy. But I'm a former comedian who loves to write witty one-liners and clever retorts. And if I write and rewrite a sermon, what you'll have is a wonderful sketch with very little inspiration from God actually in there. So it'll be, you know, you might get a couple of good lines, you might get a take home, ha ha, ho ho, but there'll be a lot of me in there and very little of God in there. So my process of going through the week is to read the scripture very early in the week, chew on it, read it again, and pray and meditate about it, and ask God to give me the words on Sunday. And my process going through the week is to make sure that I tap into my spiritual practices throughout the week that clear my head of me and give God a chance to flow in. So I didn't do that this week because I knew it was too important, and I wanted to handle the sermon myself, because God may louse it up and not get enough good lines in there that you'll like me. So I stayed up till about 2:30 grousing and I read the book Katrina suggested I read, Planning Sabbaticals, and there's a lot of great stuff in there. And I pulled a lot of good lines out of there and put it in here. So I am not going to give you this sermon. That is my first gift to you. You will not get this sermon that I labored over and wrote. Instead, I'm going to try to practice what I'm asking you to do as we go through this sabbatical together, that you let go of some of the old ideas and that you invite God in to move you in new and different ways, and that we do that together. So the one theme I am going to hang on to from this is the primary theme of that book Katrina recommended, which is really short and pretty good. And that theme is just what makes your heart sing, both to the pastor and to the congregation, because you're both walking along this path together. What makes your heart sing? So on our first Sunday of our sabbatical, we're going to think about what makes our hearts sing. What makes you feel alive in ministry, both as individuals and as a congregation? What really gets you excited? What makes you want to engage more? As a sabbatical, right, it's rest and renewal. But by rest, we don't mean being unplugged. We actually mean clearing some of that busy work, some of that stuff we think is so important so that we can plug in, right? Not unplug, but plug in. It's intentional rest, with an eye toward feeling inspired, being inspired, and better connected to God. So Jesus did this all the time, right? In the Garden of Gethsemane, he unplugs. Now there's people left out there that needed to be healed, they thought. And Jesus didn't stay till every last person was healed. Jesus went to Gethsemane to recharge his batteries, right? Jesus went and prayed so that he could have the energy and the inspiration and the courage to do what came next, which of course was not good, not something that we would be looking forward to. He was recharging and plugging into God and asking God, hey, is there another way? This doesn't sound like a good plan. I mean, and he came out of that garden and realized that was the plan and he needed to follow through. And of course, he was murdered, he was killed. But it was part of what he felt he needed to do to stay true to his mission, to truth, against corruption, and for people who had no voice. So he went and rested and recharged and then went forward. When I unplugged, I shut myself off from that sunlight of the Spirit. Now I need rest, but I need to be engaged. I need to be plugged in to God. So what's the primary difference? And you probably talked about this with Katrina a little bit over the last few weeks, especially. But what's that difference between a vacation and a sabbatical? Right? The primary difference is intention. It's intention. And some of the things I might do on a sabbatical might look vacation-y, but the difference is intention. Intention. Why am I doing this? Being reflective. What am I thinking here? What's God guiding me to do here? So you're not on vacation, and neither is Katrina. And you're especially not on vacation from one another. You're each walking along your sabbatical. So I have to tell you that it might seem strange to you, but this is a sabbatical for me. Okay, my normal ministry is I'm a chaplain. I'm a street chaplain. And any minister, whether it's Reverend Katrina or any parish minister, a lot of the work they do, this is going to sound like a gimmick that we're all in on together and we're sort of snowing you, but a lot of the work's invisible. You can't see it, right? For a minister to really be effective, they need to be plugged in to what's going on in the lives of others in their congregation all the time, and especially those who are suffering. And they need to be empathetically connected to people, but still detached in a way that they can be emotionally present and don't, when I'm with you and you're suffering, I'm suffering, right? That's kind of what Jesus was going through. But I don't project that on you and now make you take care of me. So there's a price for that, right? There's a burden on a pastor. And as a person who works primarily with unhoused folks and people on the margins, the emotional price is always high. But I chose that ministry because I can kind of do it. But I need sabbaticals every year from that so that I can be a half decent chaplain. So when I was thinking about what call I wanted to accept over the winter, I had two primary calls in mind. This was one of them. Right? And honestly, this is going to be fun. This is the kind of stuff I love to do. And the other one was one where I felt they really needed me a lot more. And they were struggling a lot more. And some part of my own probably savior complex says, like, they really need you. You ought to go help those poor folks, through this time. So I called an old trusted friend from seminary, my pal Douglas, and I told him about the two calls, and he snap answered me. He's like, oh, you need to do the sabbatical. And I'm like, but what about this? And he said, you know, I think you're going to be a more effective minister if you go to the place that's already healthy and already enthused, and they're going to help revitalize your ministry. You don't need to go fix everybody all the time. Maybe you need to go to that. Now, how do I know this is a healthy place? Well, for one, your pastor's on sabbatical. Sabbaticals are for healthy pastors who are already excellent pastors, who want to remain excellent and are smart enough to know they need a period of renewal and revitalization. And they're for healthy congregations. Also, I asked Katrina. Katrina's an old friend of mine, and she said this is a really healthy congregation with outstanding leadership. And I said, okay. And I still struggled. Well, should I go? And then it became kind of easy. And when I went to that interview process with your sabbatical team, who was the search team, all I did was pray before that meeting and just went in and was myself. You know, the first thing I said is probably something like, boy, if you need a good administrator, you sure got the wrong guy. You know, and that probably got their attention. And they said, you know, that's not my strength. That's not my strength. And I actually asked Katrina to endorse me on that fact that, yes, I was not going to be an effective administrator. And I think we all got a chuckle about that. But then we talked about what I am passionate about and what makes my heart sing, right? And I'll tell you a brief story about that. Now, this is a lead in, about 25 years ago, I was dying, and I was suffering mightily, and I had no connection to God. God had a connection to me, but I had no connection to God. I was unable to really feel anything, any guidance, and I was suffering greatly. And I met a man who I felt I could trust with sharing who I really thought I was, and that, you know, he wouldn't throw me out, and he would still love me and help me. And that guy was really my first great mentor on this long path of many, many steps. That was one of the earliest steps. And he told me that his job, I wanted him to teach me everything and tell me everything. And he said, well, my job is just to put your hand in God's hand and then kind of get out of the way and let you walk together. And I thought that was kind of beautiful and also kind of scary. But that stayed with me. And years later, I would realize that was kind of my calling. You know, whether a person was struggling with alcoholism or another addiction, or a person just felt disconnected to God, or a person was a loyal church member for 30 years who never really felt in their heart connected to God. It was more of a social connection, and they felt something was missing. And there were many, many variations of that. But my calling came to be sharing my enthusiasm and my connection in spiritual practices, et cetera, with others who wanted to connect more deeply to God. Now, this was never my idea in the first place. I had no interest in being a minister, zero. I was playing professional poker, and my wife, the daughter of a Presbyterian minister for 40 years, who vowed never to marry a minister, says to me, you should go to seminary. And I initially thought he was trying to get rid of me. Is this some ploy? And I said, okay, I'd always wanted to go to seminary. And I said, what seminary is going to take me? A, you know, stand-up comedian, poker player. And lo and behold, Andover Newton was desperate. and accepted me. And it was a great thing for each of us. And I still said, I'm never going to be a minister. No interest. I'll be a chaplain. I had already volunteered in like 15 or 16 prisons. I loved working with those folks because they're, the pretenses are gone. They really need to connect. I'd done a lot of work with folks in recovery. I'd spoken at hundreds of conventions and done a lot of retreats. And seminary seemed like a great step for me, but I still wasn't going to be a minister. Well, I met a guy whose heart song was ministry. He had been a professional musician, but he had so much enthusiasm. And he invited me to his preaching class. I said, okay. And then he invited me to his church to be a student minister. And I said, I don't think so. I don't see that happening. He said, why don't you just come and check it out? And I'm like, my memory of church was escaping from it when I was 16. And even though I pursued a connection with God, I was pretty sure that wasn't going to happen for me or deepen for me in church. So I had escaped church and had gone my own way and had connected with God and later had really intimate experience of Christ, and that had led me along that path. So here I am at seminary, and I'm at this guy Burns's church in South Boston. And I come in, and it's a great church. It's diverse in every possible way, educationally, economically, ethnically, age. I mean, people from all over the place. It was a really wonderful place. But I'm still sitting there and I'm with my wife and I'm thinking, okay, it's cool, but well, at some point, we're all waiting and this little old guy with a walker is coming down the middle of the path. And I wasn't sure if he had like passed away in the parking lot and no one told him, so he came in anyway. It was taking him forever to get down that middle aisle. And I'm like, okay, what's going on? And they're starting some music. And he finally makes it to the front and he sits on the end of the piano bench and there's a little microphone there. And they've got a 25-person choir, which is basically everyone in the church. And they start singing Love Train, which is a 1972 R&B classic. And I've always loved Love Train. I've always liked that song. And they start playing Love Train. And this little guy starts singing Love Train. And it turns out he had once been a professional blues singer. And he had had a stroke. And he was recovering from the stroke. And man, he was good. He was like, I wasn't sure he was going to be able to make it through the song. But his name was Shorty. And he was bringing the heat on Love Train. He was belting it out there. And you could see this choir all backing this guy up and how much it meant to them and how much they loved this guy. And you could see how important it was for him that he got this opportunity to offer what he had to that congregation that loved him and took care of him when maybe a lot of people weren't loving him and taking care of him. And at that moment, I said, maybe this is for me. Maybe this is what'll make my heart sing. Maybe I want to be part of this. And I became the student minister at that church, and I would not be a minister today. I'd be doing something. God would be using me somehow. But I wouldn't be a minister today if I hadn't been in that church that night. Katrina became my advisor in my home church. Burns became a trusted friend and mentor as well. And I realized that the continuation of my heart song was to be part of congregations who were trying to find their heart song and were trying to connect to God in their own way. There would be a lot of changes to that path as we would go forward. But what I now understand as a sabbatical is, yes, a renewed and rejuvenated pastor and a renewed and rejuvenated congregation, right? To encourage each person in the congregation to pursue what's going to set you on fire, what's going to get you really inspired and called to find what your next pursuit is in ministry. And the key to our path is going to be intention, intentionally pulling back from maybe some of the distracting busy work that we convince ourselves is important. And there are things that need to be done, right? And diving into what's going to light your heart song, what's going to call you. And that common thread is doing something deliberately. It's intention. It could be a yoga class. It could be pottery. Lectio Divina, centering prayer, walking a labyrinth. I have no idea. And I'm comfortable with that. I love the fact that I don't know what you need to do. God does. And if you open your heart to God and prayerfully ask, hey, what is it that I need to do to get closer to you, to open my heart to you? And we can do any and all of those things together. So next week, there'll be a little questionnaire for you to fill out. And the folks at home will be doing the same exact stuff. And we'll be filling out those questionnaires and, what would you like to do? And I'm going to be available to help out in whatever it is you decide to do. If you don't know what Lectio Divina is, I'll explain it to you. If you're not sure what centering prayer is, I'll explain it to you. Maybe there's a book you've wanted to read for a long time and you haven't given yourself permission to take time to do that. There might be 4 or 5 people who read 4 or 5 different books and come together at the end and have read those books with prayer and intention and share what they get out of those books together. There's all kinds of stuff. One thing we don't want to do is add a bunch of work or tasks, right? And I'll tell you that my go-to sin, like if sin is just something that blocks me from God and you, my sin is sloth, right? Now that doesn't mean I'm lazy. No one who knows me would suggest I'm lazy. The essence of sloth is I'm always busy doing the right thing at the wrong time. And that keeps me from connecting to God. And my ego convinces me I'm doing something good. Yeah, but you're doing it. Where's God in the picture? Kind of like how I wrote this sermon and basically threw it out. And when I do it this way, the beauty of that is, I pray and I ask God, we open my heart, God. There's something that you're trying to say to every person in this congregation, and I have no idea what it is. But if I show up and allow myself to be a vessel, to be a conduit, you'll whisper it to them somehow. You'll get it across to each person. And it won't be because it's something clever I said. It'll probably be in spite of what I've come up and said. And the beauty is when I do it that way, if the sermon stinks, it's God's fault. Because I've done everything I can. And God, whatever, didn't give me that snappy one-liner that was going to make you like me. So the last thing I'll ask you to do is to just prayerfully ask, and you might already know this, it might be written on your heart in such a bold way that you can see it, but I would ask you to pause and ask God to show you, what is your heart song? What makes you feel so alive as individuals? And you can ask yourself as a congregation, when did we really feel like we were clicking on all cylinders? And maybe it's not a process of going back to that, but asking God, okay, what's the next thing that you have in mind for us? Where are you guiding us? And as we go forward, we're going to talk more about that divine advocate, that wonderful reading from John that I didn't even touch today, that we'll probably be talking about next week and going forward. And that divine advocate, that spirit of capital T truth, when there's a capital in the middle of the sentence, that's God, right? But Jesus tells us about the spirit of truth, that divine advocate. That's what we're trying to listen to. That's what's going to share with us that heart song. So as we go forward, we're going to discover a little bit, and some of you may already know this, that going deeper is not usually about adding stuff, right? It's a process of subtraction, getting rid of the stuff that's in the way so that we can see what's already there. Holy One, I thank you so much for your presence among us here and in each of those little sanctuaries of those folks coming in through Zoom. We thank you for this place of worship and those places of worship. We thank you for your kids who showed up here today and those kids at home. And God, again, I ask that you've touched each person here with some whisper that you're trying to get across, some call that you're trying to transmit. You know, I thank you for just working, even though we're all flawed, even though, you know, and I think today I was kind of discombobulated in the morning, and God, I even thank you for that because it forced me to rely on you rather than my own cleverness. I knew I had no shot coming in if I was going to try to sell the idea that I was clever. And God, I thank you for that awareness that I had zero chance outside of you shining through today. So we thank you for that. We thank you for just sending Jesus who showed us the way and showed us how to be as people here. Showed us that we need rest. We need rest. Rest is good. And then we need to get about, you know, your business when our batteries are recharged and when we can see that guidance. We thank you for all this in Jesus' name. Amen.